Hi everyone, welcome back to my garden. There hasn't been a whole lot of gardening this summer, as over the past couple of months I was travelling. My brother and his family came to visit from Australia for 6 weeks. I got married and I also went on honeymoon. So it's only now at the end of September that I'm back in the garden, but I did take some video over the past couple of months so I can look back on what's been happening. Back at the start of June, I sowed some Nigella seeds in a tray. I had seen these at an open garden and thought that they were stunning, so I wanted to try grow some myself. First, I tried sowing some seeds direct into the soil a few weeks previous to these clips, but I hadn't seen any results, so I said I would try them in a tray instead. But then, to my surprise, in mid-July, I saw some seedlings from the seeds I'd actually sown directly. I love the colour of these flowers. They're wispy, soft kind of foliage, and the seed heads in particular just add a lot of interest and texture. I found as the weeks passed that actually the directly sown seeds did much better than the seeds sown in pots. The seeds sown direct are already turned to seed heads, whereas only now in September are the ones in pots starting to flower. So that was a good learning experience to have. Regarding no-mow summer, in June and July there was loads of bird's foot trefoil and self-heal growing in the grass in the garden. In mid-July, I had to give the edge of the grass a small trim as it was falling out onto the path and becoming a trip hazard. I heard personally, and I also saw on other people's YouTube videos, that they were noticing a lack of insects in the garden this year. But personally, I didn't notice that myself. There were some really lovely wildlife moments in the garden. I saw a bullfinch eating seeds from weeds in the garden, and I would say to anyone who wants to encourage bullfinches into your garden that these weeds seem to be essential for them as a food source. I also saw a blackbird foraging for their fledgling. I have some strawberry plants that I inherited from the last people who lived here, and I don't harvest them, mainly because the strawberries are very small. And I was pleasantly surprised to learn that the blackbirds actually eat the strawberries. So now I have even more incentive to keep them and to not harvest them so that they can be a food source for the blackbirds. While I was away on honeymoon, my dad came over to fix something in the house for me, and he is not a fan of the long grass. He really likes to keep his lawn green and short, so he cut it while I was away, unfortunately. But I suppose I got more no-mow summer this year than I did last year. I'm going to call this section Farmer Sally. In June, the tomatoes were still green, but there was lots of them coming on, which was a really positive sign. I bought 3 varieties from a stall at Bola Plant Fair in April, and pretty soon after this we started getting a harvest. I loved all of the different colours of the tomatoes. There was this kind of golden orange colour, a really bright vivid red, and kind of a dark greeny red pink colour. I don't really remember the names of them now. I think the orange one might have been called golden something, and the pinky red one was called cherry something. But if I came across these again, I would definitely buy them. We got a really good crop considering we had no greenhouse this year and they were just in pots outside the front door. And also our summer wasn't really that great in terms of heat. But luckily the front of the house is south facing, so I think that really helped them grow as best as they could. At the start of August, the potatoes looked like they were ready to harvest, so we dug them out. And for 3 potato plants, it was a pretty good crop, I would think. having not grown them before, I have no experience, but I think I would like to try and grow them again next year based on this. I got a lot of excitement out of it. In terms of what was growing each month, in June we had pink linarias, which were a new addition I bought. It's some oxeye daisies, a pink campanula, and a blue salvia, which I also bought. The creeping thyme I planted previously was growing away nicely, and the echinops were just starting to flower, as were the cheerful rudbeckias and the astilbes. I bought this hardy geranium from farmer Gracie last year, and though it never flourished, this year I noticed it's starting to kind of come into its own. I also bought and planted another verbena, as I feel there's purple colour missing from this part of the garden. The eryngium was still green at the moment, but it should start turning blue soon. And the plants I bought from Farmer Gracie this year were also doing pretty well. I haven't had a chance to plant them out yet. Outside of this, the clematis and hydrangea we inherited also started to flower. This is how the garden looked at the start of July. The echinops and veronicastrum, I think this one is called Fascination, looked really well together, and the anemones had just started to flower, as well as the gauras. The monardas I had bought in Mallow were just starting to go over, and the sweet peas outside the front door had just started to flower, along with the oxeye daisies I had planted back in June. This is what the garden looked like at the start of August. The anemones were looking really good, and the achillea I planted earlier in the summer also started flowering, along with this aster I also planted this summer. And this is what the garden looked like at the start of September. This other aster, called Little Carlo, that I planted last year started flowering, and I just love it. It's just so pretty. And the peach linarias have settled in well and put on new growth. The astilbes are gone for this year, and the rudbeckias are also on their way out, along with the echinops. The saga of the drain. A recap on the drainage issue. We dug a drain which didn't seem to work. The soil was still waterlogged, so in June we tried to drill holes into the bottom of the drain to see if that would help with draining water away. There was no rain, which meant the drain emptied, but we couldn't tell whether it had evaporated or drained down through the ground. To test the effectiveness of the holes we had drilled, I filled the drain with a couple of inches of water from the hose. And it didn't drain, basically. So I had this mad idea to just go along with the bad drainage and make like a bog garden with all these cool plants. And to ensure the soil would stay wet even in dry weather, I put in a makeshift irrigation hose. However, this was before we got to do any entertaining in the garden over the summer, and what we realised is that when we want to entertain people, we don't have enough space on the patio. It's all very squished, as we both have big families. So now I'm thinking we should extend the patio out another 12, maybe 18 inches to this line where the sticks and the string is. But I'm still thinking about that. I'm not sure whether to go ahead with it or not. I still love the idea of incorporating water into the garden somehow, as the whole point of starting a garden was to encourage wildlife. So I'm thinking of putting in a little pre-formed plastic pond in the middle of the bed where I've marked in the soil. But again, I really need to go check these things out in person before I decide to go ahead with it. Looking back on these clips of the pots outside the front door has made me realise that it really was a mixed bag. this year, in the sense the tomatoes did very well, so did the geraniums, which are the most neglected poor things. They're there all the time and I really don't look after them that well, but they seem to thrive on neglect. And the sweet peas were also a success, really, when I think about it. They did quite well, but the dahlias I thought were very hard to keep and maintain this year, and they did not come on at all. Like, I watered them, but I think maybe where I had them in the end, even though it wasn't a great summer, is just too hot for them and they just couldn't cope with the heat and they started to wilt and die. So they never even got to a flowering stage this year. So I've learned a bit from that too, which is good. You need to go through these things to learn them. The last update I suppose I have is about the cosmos seeds that I planted, which I eventually got the chance to put out into the ground in the garden once they were big enough, and they really thrived. Within a few weeks they shot up and the flower buds started to appear, and on the week of the wedding they started blooming and they were just so pretty, and there was loads of other flower buds, so there was lots more flowers to look forward to after the wedding, which was nice. And once they started flowering, they really haven't stopped since. And these clips are from earlier in September, but as I'm putting this up now, at the end of September, the start of October, they're still flowering. So even though I planted them quite late by accident, I actually would nearly do it at the same time next year, because they have given a lot of colour and life to a late summer, early autumn border, and it's just very uplifting to see them. Thanks so much for joining me, and I think from now on I'm going to change the format of these videos. So instead of starting it in the middle of the month until the middle of the following month, I might do it where I film from the start to the end of one month. So going forward it should be a video for October, November, December and so on. I think maybe that format works better. I'm going to try it out and see. So thanks a mil, and I'll see you in the next one.